And now it's an honor to be joined by Father John Hollowell. I brought you on, Father, because you gave a very good homily last Sunday addressing something that I think many of us, and especially your brother priests, might have been timid or afraid to address, especially from the pulpit, which is, of course, the scandals surrounding Cardinal Theodore McCarrick and the who knows how expansive cover-up artistry surrounding him. So first of all, thank you for your courage in preaching the way you did and for joining us here on the show, Father.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's an honor to be with you.
So, Father, you're, first of all, the parish pastor of more than one parish, isn't that right?
Yes, I'm the pastor of two parishes in western Indiana, Annunciation in Brazil, Indiana, and then St. Paul's in Greencastle. And then I do a little college ministry to DePauw University here in Greencastle as well.
So with a parish in Brazil, that means you must be bilingual.
Yes. A lot of my high school students, when they found out I was moving out here, I was in a high school before, they were sad. They were like, "We can't believe you're going to South America." I was like, "No, it's down the road."
My mother's from Indiana, by the way.
Oh,
so,
nice.
Yeah. If you have two parishes, doesn't that qualify? That means technically you're a bishop, right?
In biblical terms, probably yes.
That's what I was thinking. It's like in biblical terms, I'm sure. But to get to the topic, I'm down. Many fellow Catholics are down. I like to give myself over to anger rather than depression when I can.
Yeah.
So that's my mood. But we're talking about the scandal surrounding Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. For some of our viewers who may not be familiar, this is one of the most prominent clerics in our country. For some time was the bishop of our nation's capital, and it has been recently revealed that he was essentially a homosexual predator for decades, preying especially on young seminarians. That's come to light. Many questions are being asked, few answers are being given, because one aspect of this is it seems hard to believe that his direct co-workers, other prominent clerics, were all completely ignorant of his behavior. Last Sunday, Father, I think God gave us a reading, as many pointed out, that seemed to pertain especially well to this scandal, to address the concerns of the church and of the faithful, and you ran with it. So I'd like you to take the lead here. Give us your thoughts on what is a Catholic to think of this?
Well, yeah, I think the reading certainly did open themselves up for this. And I think, as I shared in the homily, I entered the seminary as the first round of scandals was breaking in Boston. And then, of course, obviously around the country as word continued to spread. And I think it feels like this is round two. I feel like we had kind of gotten to a place where I feel like things were getting better and some steps were being taken. And then when you kind of learn about all of this, it really, I think for myself, and I know for Catholics all over the country, it really kind of reopens that wound and is very discouraging because it gives you the impression that that not only are we like maybe back to where we were, but that people that were leading the charge to clean things up supposedly were part of the problem, So it's almost like right. What we thought the healing that had started to happen, there's a temptation to even invalidate that healing for us, which is always kind of traumatic, and so yeah, I felt like it needed to be said, and so I said it.
Now, you said it from the pulpit. One thing that comes to my mind, because I think of you and your brother priests in this scenario, is it's hard for me as a member of the laity in the church in some ways, and then it's hard for members of the clergy in a different way, I would think. One of the things that I loved about your homily, by the way, was that you called to the laity, like, look, you have a role to play here, right?
Right.
It's not just, sitting and observing. And I've talked about this before. I get sick and tired of hearing from laity as if the clergy has to always, in every way, lead the way morally,
right? Rather
than saying, well, no, I'm not letting the clergy off the hook, but if they fail, that doesn't mean that I have to fail, you see?
Yeah.
What do you think, how do you navigate that, the distinction between the clergy, who many of whom actually have official vows to obedience to not necessarily good bishops, right? That can happen.
Right.
And then the laity who have, I think, a lot more freedom, but a little less authority, technically. What do you think of that whole dichotomy?
Yeah, I think we all have our roles to play, and our strengths that come to us because of our situation, and then our weaknesses, or hurdles that come to us because of our situations. And so I'm able to preach, right? And I mean, like,
Yeah.
I am able to help comfort. And I think that was part of the power. I had no idea that this homily was going to go Catholic viral, but I think part of the power of it, I guess, or when I read why people are sharing it, it's that because of the position of the priest, there's a healing that can come in when other people are, because that's what people are saying when they share it. They're like, look, here's a cleric saying sorry, a cleric that owning this as that it's awful. And so there is a power. Like, even if you have a way larger platform than I, right? There's lots of laity, but a layperson saying sorry doesn't convey to people, because it was done by a clerics. And so there's strengths that come because, and things that I'm able to do as a priest, but then there's also things that the laity are able to do, and strengths that come from being a layperson in the church, and options and opportunities to say things, to demand accountability, to back up, priests and bishops who are calling for reforms of how things are handled. So I think it's just important to recognize, okay, I have strengths and weaknesses because of where I'm at in the church. We all do. And so let's use our strengths and the gifts that God has given us in the positions and platforms.
Well, one thing is that there's a lot of important work to be done in terms of morally shaping the culture around us.
Right.
And a lot of that takes the form of actually political activism.
Mm-hmm.
And, right after this scandal broke, there was a lot of commentary and there was a lot of goings-on surrounding Catholic adoption agencies in particularly Philadelphia being discriminated against because they refused to cooperate with the homosexualist agenda of the political left. So you can't be an adoption service unless you're not Catholic anymore, essentially, when it comes to sexual teachings. And that controversy was heating up, and I thought to myself, it is really hard to swallow. It's unacceptable, really, that we have lay activists and lawyers and commentators trying hard to defend the right of Christian organizations to serve as adoption agencies against a discriminatory homosexualist left. Meanwhile, some of the most prominent leaders in the church are proving themselves to be, predators and sex abuse cover-up artists and homosexualists in a way.
Right.
And there's this dichotomy that's really infuriating. It's unacceptable. What do you think of the possibility that, if, in a way, the moral authority of some higher clergy goes the way of the Hindenburg, and there's a separate, you see what I'm saying? Could that actually end up bolstering or freeing up some of the activism among lay Catholics? What do you think of that?
Yeah, I do. And thank you for saying that, because I think you said it way better than I could. But you're absolutely right, and that's one of the tragedies, right, of this whole thing, is that it undermines the teaching authority of the church, and it undermines the teaching authority of individual bishops. But if the church or individual bishops, aren't going to be teaching the truth anyway, then maybe that's a good thing. I don't know if I think that's what I hear you saying. Maybe we have to be radically for the truth and preaching it all the time as lay people, as bishops, as priests. And if we stop, then and we make any compromise in any way with the truth, then we're done.
Right. One of the great analogies you made in your homily is worth repeating here about the time you entered the church, people entering the church now, people becoming more involved in the faith now.
Right.
Could you repeat that for us?
I was just inviting people to say, the church is on fire, right? It is burning. And I think as I'm tempted to despair or anger, as you said earlier, which I agree with, we do take some solace, I think, in looking back and recognizing that the church has been fighting this battle within herself because there's always been evil members in the church from the beginning. And so there's been this battle for a long time, and we can take courage in the fact that our ancestors in the faith and all of the holy people have fought it before. And so just encouraging people to run into the church. I think the leading message here is that needs to be said, particularly by clerics, is we are sorry and we are working at this, and it needs to be fixed, and we need to keep doing that, and the laity needs to hold the church accountable. But I do think also we can say at the same time that, like, run into the church and dive in and trust that God is with us in the midst of this. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, running into a building that's on fire,
Right,
I just think is a really good analogy, because, like I said, when faced with trauma, there's a saying that's depression is anger turned inward.
yeah,
And anger is, generally speaking, a less pathologically inclined emotion.
right,
Especially, I think, for young men. And there are many young men who view my show.
yeah,
So I kind of want to encourage people, like, anger can be put to use. Despair and depression, not so much.
right.
Yeah.
No, I think absolutely. Taking that, I mean, we hear about righteous anger in the scriptures, right? There are things, particularly the abuse of children and the abuse of teenagers by people in positions of authority, and a complete failure in the worst ways, in the worst sins, to be shepherds. We ought to be angry about that. We ought to experience the anger that God has towards those sins, and that ought to inspire us not to retreat, but to say, we need to run in as soldiers and take over and continue to demand the truth and charity win, So I hope young men hear it and see it and say, we need to run in there and help.
Right, and I think especially with regard to the more public and civic issues, where there are clear delineations between darkness and light and goodness and evil, there are these battles going on that end up becoming political. Lay people can get very involved in that, especially if they see arms of the church attempting to be involved in these things and seeing that it's not effective. The moral authority isn't there, or some local Catholic charity is ineffectual in addressing a local epidemic of opioid problems or whatever. You can step in, right, as a lay Catholic. I mean, do you have to wait for marching orders from the Vatican or from the local chancery office? Why should you?
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's been one of the powerful things about the laity is sort of awakening, I think, to their dignity and to the authority that they have and the ability that they have to affect change in the world and to bring the gospel and the good news of Christ to people. Like, the laity are realizing, at least in the United States over the last 50 or 60 years, there is a real power, and we just need to keep that going, and keep helping shape that and help people understand what that means.
Right.
It still has reference to the Gospels, right? It still has reference, of course, to the church's teachings on things. And so it isn't just sort of this civic activism. It's being done out of this. So we have to continue to make sure that it's rooted in the gospel and the church's teachings, right? And help people understand how to do it,
right,
and what it looks like. But absolutely, that is such a great thing, I think, that's starting to happen in our country as individual Catholics and small communities saying, we can change the world.
I've seen so many very effective activists, people who take care of the homeless, people who serve at local pregnancy centers, all of this kind of thing, all of these various kinds of witness. You can do this with your own money, or find donors to support your own apostolate to do this kind of thing. And what you can do is you can just quietly go find Father John and ask for his blessing. rather than saying, be nice if the Catholic Church trademark did something about this, or I will only give money to this Catholic trademark organization that's addressing, because they're the only ones addressing this problem. No, I mean, there's so much flexibility. So yeah, that's good to hear you say. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I hope we can ask for your blessing for things like that. I can almost predict that good laypersons might come in and fill a void insofar as the moral authority of some hierarchs declines.
I think that's spot on. One of the people that I look to a lot, I've kind of fallen in love with her. I'm reading a biography of her at the moment, of Saint Catherine of Siena, and the fact that, when the Pope was in the midst of controversy in her day, she went and challenged that authority and basically, said, you need to end this schism. And so correction comes from the laity, it comes from small people when the teaching authority is forsaken by those who ought to be wielding it.
Well, this is encouraging stuff, good can come from evil. Not that we should ever root for evil.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that you've really grappled with this and done so in public, in front of the faithful. So thank you for your spiritual and moral leadership, Father. And I look forward to having you on again soon.
Thanks for having me and for all the great work you're doing. God bless.